What if the seat you paid for, the seat you knew was yours, became the stage where your very dignity was put on trial? What if, high above the clouds, you were told you didn't belong, not because of your ticket, not because of your name, but because of the color of your skin? This is the story of Selena Morgan. A quiet evening flight turned into a firestorm of humiliation, live-streamed to the world in real time. A flight attendant and a supervisor doubted her right to sit in first class. A young passenger captured everything on her phone, and as hundreds of thousands tuned in, Selena found herself at the center of a storm. She never asked for a storm that would shake an entire airline to its core. But here's the question you must ask yourself when dignity is stripped away in front of strangers. Can one person's calm defiance spark a movement powerful enough to change an industry? Stay with us until the end. Because this is not just about one seat, it's about every seat, every passenger, every person who has ever been told they do not belong. If you believe stories like this need to be heard, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's step aboard. Selena Morgan adjusted the strap of her leather tote as she stepped into the boarding area of Terminal C. The air smelled of strong coffee and recycled air, with a faint tang of disinfectant clinging to every surface. Families clustered near the gate, children sprawled on iPads, while business travelers typed furiously on laptops balanced precariously on rolling suitcases. Selena blended easily among them, though anyone paying attention might notice her quiet elegance. Her blouse was silk, pale ivory under the fluorescent light, and her pearl studs caught the reflection of the boarding display. She wasn't showy, not the type to flaunt wealth, but there was an unmistakable composure in the way she stood, weight balanced, shoulders square, eyes calm and steady. She had been in countless courtrooms, representing clients who had faced subtle exclusion, the kind that rarely left physical bruises, but left scars all the same. Today was supposed to be simple, just a flight, just lunch with her husband Adrian after he wrapped a meeting in Chicago. Her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. "How's everything at the gate? Excited to see you on board." She smiled faintly, thumbs brushing the screen but not replying just yet. "Ma'am?" The voice cut through the low murmur of the gate, firm, slightly sharp. Selena turned to see a flight attendant, tall and perfectly groomed in the airline's navy uniform. His name tag read Colin Mercer. His expression was polite enough on the surface, but his eyes scanned her quickly, assessing. "Yes." Selena's voice was steady, calm. "First-class boarding is about to begin. Are you certain you're in the correct lane?" His tone wasn't a question so much as a suggestion that she wasn't. Selena's hand brushed the edge of her boarding pass, tucked neatly into a leather wallet. "I am," she said simply. Colin leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice, though several passengers nearby could still hear. "These seats are reserved for our premium travelers. We have economy boarding in about 15 minutes. Selena took a slow breath. She had heard this tone before in office lobbies, in restaurants, in neighborhoods where her presence was silently questioned. It was the sound of someone confident that authority would back them up. "I have seat 2A, she replied, producing her boarding pass and offering it without hesitation. Colin glanced at it, lips tightening just slightly. "Ma'am, sometimes people make mistakes. This section is for confirmed elite members and executives. Do you perhaps mean 12A? Notus, Selena said. "I mean exactly what it says. 2A, first class." His smile thinned, a flash of condescension passing across his features. Passengers waiting nearby had begun to notice. A teenage girl with a braided bun, later Selena would learn her name, was Maya Torres, pulled out her phone, angling the camera discreetly. Selena felt the heat rise in her chest, but kept her breathing even. "Not now," she told herself. "Not yet. Don't let him decide the terms." Colin straightened his tie, signaling toward the supervisor across the counter. A man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a stiff navy blazer approached. His name tag read Victor Langston. "What seems to be the issue?" "Colin, this passenger insists she's seated in first class." "There may have been an error," Colin said smoothly, though his eyes flicked briefly toward Selena as if she were the error. Victor's gaze swept her from head to toe, pausing just long enough to communicate judgment. "Ticket, please." Selena handed it over without comment. Victor scanned it, then looked at her again, brows lifting faintly. "Mrs. Morgan, this ticket may have been purchased in error. These seats are typically reserved for members of our premium program." "Do you have proof of status?" Selena tilted her head, almost amused at the precision of his phrasing. "Purchased in error." The words were familiar. She had read them in rejection letters for clients who were not a fit. She had heard them in depositions where managers insisted exclusion was just a matter of policy. "My credit card was accepted," she said lightly. "My reservation was confirmed. That's usually the proof." Victor's lips pressed into a line. Around them, the boarding area had grown quieter. The Harrington family, a couple with platinum luggage tags, approached the desk. Instantly, Colin's demeanor shifted. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, welcome back. Your preferred seats are ready. Champagne is being chilled as we speak." He reached out warmly, shaking hands, ushering them through without so much as a glance at their paperwork. Selena noted it all silently. The contrast was almost too textbook. If this were a deposition, I wouldn't even have to ask leading questions. Victor cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to step aside while we complete verification. We have other premium passengers to process." Selena did not move. "I'll stand right here." The words were calm, even soft, but they landed with weight. Victor's jaw flexed. Colin shifted uneasily, glancing at the growing cluster of passengers now openly watching. Maya Torres whispered to the friend beside her, "This is crazy." She showed the ticket. The camera lens remained fixed, capturing every second. Selena's phone buzzed again. A text from Adrian this time, board delayed. "Want me to check in with operations?" She let the screen dim, unwilling to show her hand just yet. Victor gestured subtly to a nearby security officer, who began walking over with measured steps. The move was calculated. Selena realized, intimidation cloaked in procedure. Her heart thudded once, heavy. For a fleeting second, she imagined herself giving in, stepping aside, disappearing quietly into the background. Maybe it's not worth the fight. Maybe today I just want to get to Adrian without a scene. But then she remembered clients who had said those same words, the stories she had carried into courtrooms, the humiliation written across their faces as they recounted being asked to prove their right to exist in certain spaces. Her chin lifted almost imperceptibly. "I'll remain here until boarding begins." The officer reached them, eyes scanning the scene, but before he could speak, another voice interrupted. "Is there a problem?" A man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses stepped forward. His blazer bore the crest of a university, and his voice carried the measured calm of academia. I couldn't help but overhear. This woman presented a first-class ticket. Why is she being questioned? Colin's smile tightened. "Sir, we're simply ensuring our policies are followed." "Policies that waved the Harringtons through without a blink," the man countered. His tone wasn't loud, but the precision cut through the air. Selena glanced at him, meeting his eyes. He gave the smallest nod. Later, she would learn his name, Dr. Henry Caldwell. For now, he was simply an ally. The officer hesitated, uncertain. Passengers shifted, murmurs spreading, phones angled higher. Maya Torres whispered, "It's live. 20 people already watching." Selena kept her face serene, though inside her thoughts swirled. Do I hold the line here? Do I reveal Adrian's connection now, or wait? The boarding screen flickered, announcing pre-boarding. Colin cleared his throat. "Mrs. Morgan, I'll need you to step out of line until this is resolved." Selena's pulse steadied. Every choice in her life had taught her this moment the courtroom training, the strategy, the patience. She wasn't just holding a boarding pass. She was holding a mirror to their bias. She smiled faintly. "Oh, no. I'll board when my group is called, like everyone else with seat 2A. The murmur in the gate swelled, a tide that even Victor and Colin could feel pressing against them. What had begun as a private attempt at dismissal was now a public confrontation, and the balance of power was starting, just barely, to shift. Selena's phone buzzed again. This time, she allowed herself a glance. Adrian's text, "I'm walking toward your gate." Her lips curved the slightest bit. They had no idea what storm was about to land. The moment boarding for first class was called, tension in the gate thickened like storm clouds. Colin Mercer moved briskly, his posture sharp, his voice rehearsed as he announced, "First class boarding now, for our premium passengers." The words felt like a door deliberately being closed in Selena Morgan's face. Selena held her ground. She stepped forward when the screen flashed her boarding group, the boarding pass glowing faintly on her phone. But as soon as she reached the podium, Colin's arm extended across the scanner. "Ma'am," he said, his smile thin and mechanical, "I'll ask you once more to step aside. There appears to be an inconsistency with your reservation." Her voice was steady. "There is no inconsistency. My reservation is valid, confirmed, and it is seat 2A. The people around them shifted uneasily, pretending not to listen while clearly absorbing every word. The Harringtons, already sipping champagne inside the jet bridge, were visible through the glass wall. Their laughter filtered faintly into the gate. Victor Langston arrived at Colin's side like a judge entering his courtroom, chin lifted with self-importance. His voice was calm but carried the finality of someone certain of authority. "Mrs. Morgan, we need to verify your status with our premium team. Please step to the side while we complete the process." Selena's mind ticked through the familiar phrases. Verify your status. Complete the process. Step aside. All euphemisms that had been used for generations to displace people who didn't look like they belonged. "Mr. Langston," she replied, her tone polite but edged with steel. "You've already seen my boarding pass. You have my name, my reservation, and confirmation that this seat was purchased. What more is it you require?" Victor's gaze hardened. "Proof of premium eligibility. These seats are reserved for executive members, frequent flyers with elite status, or those invited by corporate partnerships." Selena tilted her head slightly. "So my payment isn't sufficient?" Victor hesitated. "It's unusual. Mrs. Morgan." There it was. The mask slipped. Unusual. Not incorrect. Not invalid. Simply unusual. Behind her, Maya Torres muttered to her friend, the live stream rolling steadily. "He just admitted it's unusual. Not wrong. That's all." The comments scrolled across her screen faster than she could read. "What's unusual? She has a ticket. Racist much. Keep filming." The officer lingered near the edge of the crowd, arms folded. waiting for a cue. Doctor. Henry Caldwell cleared his throat. His voice carried the weight of decades spent lecturing students who respected him. Gentlemen, she has provided her boarding pass. Unless you suspect fraud, there's no legitimate reason to delay her. Colin's smile turned brittle. Sir, with all due respect, we are following airline procedure. Which procedure is that? Caldwell asked, calm but cutting. The one that allows others to walk through unchecked while she is interrogated. Victor's patience thinned. He leaned closer to Selena, lowering his voice though everyone nearby could still hear. Mrs. Morgan, if you refuse to cooperate, we will be forced to escalate this matter to airport security. That could involve removal from the flight. Selena's heartbeat steadied into a rhythm she knew well, the courtroom cadence. She thought of cross-examinations, of witnesses who faltered under pressure, of moments where silence could be more powerful than words. I will board when my group is called, she said, like every other passenger holding seat 2A. Victor's face flushed. He gestured sharply to the officer. Escort her aside. The officer stepped forward, hand hovering near her elbow, but paused when he saw her expression. Calm, steady, unyielding. It was the look of someone who would not be moved lightly. Passengers murmured louder now. A young mother whispered to her partner, "Why are they treating her like that? She showed her pass." Another man shook his head, muttering into his phone. I've never seen anything like this. Selena felt the weight of their eyes pressing on her. Shame threatened to creep in, to curl her shoulders, to push her into compliance, but she refused it. She thought of Adrian, waiting in Chicago, expecting her to arrive with her head held high. She thought of the clients she had represented, who had folded under pressure because no one had stood beside them. Today, she would not fold. Colin's voice hardened. Ma'am, this isn't optional. Her answer was simple, almost soft. Neither is my right to the seat I paid for. For a heartbeat. Silence stretched across the gate. Then, Maya's voice, loud enough to carry everyone can see what's happening. This is live. Hundreds of people are watching. Victor's head snapped toward her. Turn that off. Maya shook her head, holding the phone higher. No, the world deserves to see this. The officer shifted uncomfortably. His training had prepared him for disruptive passengers, for drunken fights, for contraband arguments, not for a scene being broadcast live to the internet, with a poised woman refusing to surrender dignity. Selena's phone buzzed again. Adrian, delay longer than 10 minutes. I'll contact operations. She exhaled slowly, tucking the phone away. Not yet, she thought. Not until they've shown their hand completely. Victor tried again, this time lowering his voice as though bargaining. Mrs. Morgan, please, step aside quietly, and we can sort this out without incident. She turned to him fully, her eyes calm but unwavering. An incident has already occurred. Mr. Langston, the only question is how you intend to resolve it. The gate fell silent. Even the announcement system seemed to hesitate before crackling out the next boarding call. Passengers shuffled, some glancing nervously at their own tickets, wondering if they too might be questioned. Though everyone knew the truth, it wasn't about tickets. It was about her. Colin's jaw worked as he prepared to speak again, but a hand on his shoulder stopped him. It was the officer, voice low but firm. Maybe let her board. If it's valid, it's valid. We don't need this turning into something bigger. Victor shot him a glare, but hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. He looked at Selena as though calculating whether she was worth the risk of doubling down. Selena didn't flinch. She held his gaze, calm, unyielding. Her inner voice whispered, "This is bigger than a seat. This is about every time someone has been told to wait, to move, to prove themselves twice as much." The gate agent announced again, "Now boarding rows 1 and 2. Selena stepped forward, sliding her phone across the scanner. The machine beeped. Green light flashing confirmation. The sound was louder than any protest, sharper than any excuse. It was the sound of truth cutting through pretense. Colin's smile cracked. Victor's shoulders stiffened, and the officer stepped back. Selena walked toward the jet bridge with calm precision. Each step measured, shoulders square, chin high. Behind her, the murmurs erupted into full conversation. Maya's livestream buzzed with thousands of viewers. Caldwell muttered to a nearby passenger. She handled that with more dignity than they deserved. Selena's heart pounded, but she kept her face serene. As the jet bridge swallowed her, she whispered inwardly to herself, "Hold steady. This isn't over. The real confrontation is yet to come." The air inside the jet bridge was cool and humming with the metallic echo of ventilation. Selena walked slowly, her heels clicking against the floor, every step deliberate. The boarding pass still glowed faintly on her phone screen, as though reminding her that she had every right to be there. Yet she could feel the tension following her like a shadow. She reached the entrance of the first-class cabin, where the flight attendants stood in polished uniforms, their smiles trained to be welcoming. But Colin Mercer had slipped ahead, waiting for her like a sentry guarding a gate. His smile was professional, but thin, his eyes sharp with unspoken irritation. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, voice pitched just loud enough for the other attendants to hear. "We're still waiting for confirmation regarding your seat." Selena paused in the doorway, aware of the passengers already seated, eyes lifting from tablets and newspapers. Their curiosity sharpened into judgment in an instant. Some turned away quickly, as if not to be caught staring, while others lingered on her with open doubt. "I scanned my boarding pass," she said evenly. "It was accepted. The machine confirmed it." Colin folded his arms, body blocking the aisle. Sometimes machines make mistakes. The words carried a quiet cruelty. Selena breathed in, held it, and let it out slowly. "Hold steady," she reminded herself. "Don't give them what they want." Behind her, a line of passengers was forming in the jet bridge. She could hear the faint shuffle of shoes, the cough of someone impatient. She felt the weight of being the obstacle, the one slowing everything down. Shame tried to creep in like a draft under a closed door. She pressed her shoulders back. "Then perhaps the mistake," she said gently, "is assuming the machine failed, instead of assuming I belong here." Colin blinked, surprised by her phrasing. For a fraction of a second, he faltered, but then the thin smile returned. "Please step to the side while I check with my supervisor." "You already checked," Selena replied, her voice quiet but resolute. "And you already saw my boarding pass?" A passenger in seat 1B, a man with a crisp business suit and a silver watch that gleamed under the cabin lights, leaned toward Colin. "Do you need me to move my bag so she can sit in economy?" he asked casually, his tone dripping with entitlement. Selena's stomach clenched. She wanted to answer, to fire back with the truth that her seat was in first class, that she had earned it and paid for it. But she forced herself into silence. She knew instinctively that responding to him would give Colin and Victor more ground to claim she was disruptive. The whispers spread. A woman across the aisle muttered to her husband, They really should make sure people know their place before boarding. Selena's breath caught. For a split second, the voices of the past rushed in memories of her grandmother telling stories about buses, about water fountains marked for one group but not another, about doors quietly closed to people like them. Those stories weren't history. They were alive, replaying in this cabin. Her phone buzzed again. Adrian. Still delayed. I'm calling the airline if you're not seated soon. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Revealing his role now would end the humiliation instantly. But another voice inside whispered, if you reveal it too soon, they'll claim it was just a misunderstanding. They'll walk away unchanged. Colin's voice cut back in. Ma'am, unless you can provide documentation of elite status, I can't allow you to remain in this section. We'll have to reseat you. Her pulse steadied. My documentation, she said softly, is right here. She tapped her boarding pass again. The green confirmation still displayed. The air thickened. One of the junior flight attendants shifted nervously, glancing at Colin as though unsure whether to intervene. Victor Langston appeared again, striding down the aisle with the authority of someone who had been called to put an end to dissent. His face was set, his voice rehearsed. Mrs. Morgan, we've been more than patient. If you continue to refuse, we will involve security. Selena's eyes flicked toward the officer now stationed at the cabin door, hand resting near his radio. The image was chilling an armed presence standing ready to remove her, not because of any crime, but because she dared to sit in a seat she had purchased. Her inner dialogue swirled. If I resist, they will call me combative. If I comply, they win. Every outcome is shaped against me. The weight pressed on her chest. She thought of Adrian again, of his calm insistence that dignity mattered more than appearances. She thought of their daughter. Who would one day ask about moments like this? Who would want to know whether her mother stood tall or bowed? Her voice was quiet but carried. If you intend to remove me, then remove me. But know that you are removing a paying passenger from her rightful seat, and know that every person watching will remember what they saw. The cabin fell into uneasy silence. From the third row, Maya Tor's voice rang out, trembling with both fear and conviction. They're live. Thousands of people are watching now. Everyone can see. Victor's face darkened. He turned sharply toward Maya. Put that phone away. She shook her head, holding it higher. No, this is evidence. Colin's hand twitched, as though he considered snatching the phone. But he stopped. Too many eyes, too much risk. Selena's composure remained, but inside her mind churned. She weighed the choice. Do I reveal who I am now? Do I pull Adrian into this moment? Or do I let them finish their performance until the truth can strike with full force? She remembered her law professor's words from years ago. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Let the other side walk themselves into the hole they've dug. So she said nothing. Victor exhaled through his nose, frustration mounting. Officer, he said, turning toward the man at the door. Escort Mrs. Morgan out of first class. We'll resolve her status at the gate. The officer stepped forward, but hesitation lingered in his eyes. Sir, her boarding pass scanned. If I remove her and it turns out she's correct. That's not your concern, Victor snapped. Do your job. Selena sat down. Seat 2A, her seat. The leather was cool against her palms as she rested them on the armrests, her body language radiating calm. She didn't raise her voice, didn't resist physically. She simply occupied the space that was hers. The officer froze, removing a passenger who was seated, calm, and compliant, but clearly being mistreated wasn't a simple task. Cameras pointed in his direction. The livestream was still rolling. Colin hissed under his breath. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Selena looked at him, eyes steady. "I'm not making this harder." "You are." For the first time. A flicker of doubt passed through Colin's face. The tension in the cabin was unbearable, stretched taut like a string about to snap. Passengers whispered, some openly recording now. "Doctor?" Caldwell cleared his throat, his voice carrying authority again. "Gentlemen, if you proceed with this, you are exposing the airline to liability far greater than you realize." Victor's jaw clenched, his pride wounded by the idea of losing control. He barked an order to Colin. "Stay with her. Don't let her settle in until I return with confirmation." Selena leaned back slightly, her voice just loud enough for Colin to hear. "The confirmation you'll get," she said softly, "will not be the one you expect." Her phone buzzed once more. Adrian's message was simple this time. "Say the word." Selena closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. She wasn't ready to say it yet. Not until Victor and Colin revealed the full depth of their prejudice. Not until every witness in this cabin had seen, heard, and felt it. Only then would she unleash the truth. The cabin lights glowed soft and golden. A carefully engineered hue meant to calm passengers as they settled in. But there was nothing calming about the air now. It crackled with unease, with the electric tension of too many eyes focused on a single woman who had dared to sit where some believed she did not belong. Selena Morgan adjusted herself in seat 2A, her back straight, her tote tucked neatly beneath the seat in front of her. She clasped her hands in her lap, a picture of composure, though inside her chest a storm rolled. Her pulse drummed against her ribs. She knew she looked calm, and that was part of her power. Yet she felt the sting of humiliation creeping in, the kind that worked its way under the skin and whispered, "They think you don't belong." Victor Langston returned, his shoes clicking against the aisle floor with authority. Colin Mercer stood at attention beside him, like a soldier ready to enforce orders. Victor's voice carried, deliberately louder than necessary, "Mrs. Morgan, until your status is verified, you are not permitted to remain seated here. If you refuse to cooperate, you will be removed from the aircraft." The words echoed through the cabin, bouncing off the walls, landing on every passenger's ears. Some shifted uncomfortably in their plush leather seats, while others stared openly, drinking in the spectacle. Selena lifted her chin. "I have complied fully. I presented my boarding pass. It scanned without issue, and I have taken my assigned seat. There is nothing more required of me." Victor leaned closer, lowering his voice, but not enough to keep it private. "This is first class. Miss Morgan, these seats are reserved for our highest-tier travelers. You understand how unusual it looks when someone without clear credentials sits here." The humiliation burned deeper now. The implication was naked, dressed only in the veneer of professionalism. He was saying she didn't look like someone who could sit there. Selena inhaled slowly, her eyes steady. "Unusual does not mean invalid. It means your assumptions are wrong." Colin smirked faintly, as if he had scored a point. "Passengers are waiting. You're delaying departure." The cabin murmured. A man in row 2 muttered, "Just let them handle it." "We don't need to be late." A woman across the aisle whispered to her partner, "She's making a scene." Selena closed her eyes briefly. Am I making a scene, or are they creating one around me? The thought cut deep. the way gaslighting always did. She fought back the rising shame that threatened to flood her. She reminded herself that the truth was simple. She was in her seat, and they were the ones escalating. "Doctor." Henry Caldwell shifted forward in his seat, his academic tone ringing through the quiet cabin. "This woman has provided proof of her ticket. Your scanner accepted it. Continuing to harass her is discriminatory. Plain and simple." Victor shot him a sharp look. "Sir, this is an airline matter. Please stay seated." "Justice," Caldwell replied calmly, "is everyone's matter." The officer at the cabin door cleared his throat. Uncomfortable. His hand lingered near his radio, but his eyes flicked uneasily toward the row of cameras pointed at him. He knew, as they all knew now, that this was no longer private. Selena's humiliation twisted tighter when Colin reached for her tote. "If you could just let me stow this in economy for you, we'll resolve everything later." Her hand shot out, firm on the handle. Don't touch my belongings." Her voice was soft but sharp enough to slice through the murmurs. Colin froze, his face flushing with irritation. Passengers leaned closer, hungry for drama. Maya Torres's livestream captured every frame, her breath audible as she whispered to her audience. "They're trying to move her stuff. This is unreal. There are 10,000 people watching now." Victor straightened, making a show of authority. "Mrs. Morgan, last warning. Cooperate, or we will forcibly remove you." Selena's body felt heavy, weighted by decades of stories echoing through her family. She saw her grandmother's face, lined with age and strength, telling her as a child about being told to move to the back of the bus. She heard her mother's voice, recounting job interviews where she was told she was overqualified but never hired. Those ghosts of injustice pressed in now, demanding she choose silence or defiance. Her inner voice whispered, "You could get up. You could walk away quietly. You could end this humiliation before it deepens." Another voice rose louder. "If you do, they win not just over you, but over everyone watching." Selena steadied herself, her eyes locking on Victor's. "If you attempt to remove me, you will be removing me unlawfully from my paid seat. And I assure you, the consequences will not stop when we land." The silence that followed was heavy. Colin broke it with a laugh that carried no humor. "Big words, Mrs. Morgan, but words don't change policy." Selena's gaze didn't waver. "No, but truth does, and everyone here has seen it." The humiliation had shifted. It no longer clung to her. It began to cling to them. Passengers whispered louder now, their tones disapproving, some even disgusted with the treatment unfolding before them. A teenage boy leaned across the aisle to whisper to Maya, "My mom says she's right. This is messed up." Victor, desperate to reassert control, raised his voice again, deliberately shaming her. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. This passenger is refusing to comply with standard procedures, and we are doing everything we can to address the situation." Gas rose. A woman shook her head, muttering. She complied. "I saw it." Another man groaned. "He's lying." Selena's cheeks burned. To be cast publicly as uncooperative, disruptive, that was the humiliation cutting deepest of all. She felt the sting behind her eyes, but refused to let tears come. Not here, not in front of them. She pressed her nails lightly into her palms, grounding herself. "Doctor," Caldwell spoke again, louder this time. "This is not disruption. This is dignity, and you are trampling it." Victor ignored him, waving his hand as if swatting away a gnat. "Officer, remove her now." The officer stepped forward. But hesitation lingered. Cameras glared. Livestream comments exploded across screens. He touched his radio, but didn't raise it. Instead, he looked at Selena. His eyes softened for the briefest moment. A silent question. "Do you want to fight this?" Selena's voice was steady, though every muscle in her body trembled with contained fury. "I will not move. I will not surrender my seat. If you remove me, you will expose not me, but yourselves." Victor's face reddened, veins visible at his temple. He leaned down, close enough that she could smell the faint cologne clinging to his jacket. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he hissed. Selena's lips curved faintly. "Neither do you." The words landed like a spark in dry grass. She could feel the shift ripple through the cabin. Some passengers smirked. Others murmured approval. Maya whispered into her phone, "She's fire. They have no idea." Victor straightened, struggling to regain control. He glanced toward Colin, who looked uneasy now. The junior flight attendant fidgeted near the galley, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding spectacle. The humiliation was still there, but Selena realized something had changed. What was meant to diminish her had instead begun to diminish them. Their attempts at shaming her publicly had backfired, exposing their prejudice to a cabin full of witnesses and a digital audience growing by the second. Still, the sting of it lingered. She felt it under her skin, raw and heavy, but she carried it with grace, wearing composure like armor. The officer finally stepped back, shaking his head slightly. "I'm not putting my hands on her. Not with all these cameras." Victor's fury cracked. He turned, storming toward the galley. Barking into his radio, Colin followed quickly, leaving Selena alone in her seat, surrounded by murmurs and eyes. Her humiliation was real, undeniable, but so was her resilience. And as she sat in seat 2A, hands clasped tightly together, she whispered inwardly to herself, "Not today. Not this time." The hum of the engines beneath the floor was constant, a low vibration that should have been comforting. Instead, it only amplified the tension. Selena sat upright in 2A, her hands resting calmly on her lap. On the surface, she looked composed, but inside she was burning. Every word Victor Langston had spoken still echoed in her ears, replaying like an insult carved into stone. Passengers whispered behind her, their voices no longer hushed enough to hide. Some were sympathetic, others skeptical, and a few openly dismissive. The entire cabin felt like a jury deliberating her worth. Maya Torres' phone gleamed like a small lighthouse in the dimmed cabin. She was whispering into it, narrating what she saw. She's just sitting there. She's not yelling, not being aggressive. They're the ones making a scene. Over 20,000 people are watching right now. Selena closed her eyes briefly, forcing herself to breathe. She hated being reduced to a spectacle, but at the same time, she recognized the power in it. The humiliation she endured wasn't just hers anymore. It was public, undeniable, unedited. "Doctor..." Caldwell shifted in his seat again, his gray brows furrowed with quiet outrage. "This is unconscionable," he murmured, but loud enough for others to hear. "I've flown this airline for decades, and I've never seen such blatant mistreatment." Across the aisle, the woman who had whispered earlier stiffened. She muttered, maybe she should just cooperate. It would be easier for everyone. Her husband nodded, saying under his breath, "We're already 20 minutes behind schedule. Some of us have connections to make." The words stung, not because they were unexpected, but because they were familiar. Convenience had always been the enemy of justice. People willing to trade someone else's dignity for a few minutes of their own time. Selena's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. Colin Mercer reappeared, standing just far enough away to avoid confrontation, but close enough to remind her of his presence. His arms folded tightly, his posture stiff, his eyes cold. He didn't speak, but his expression said everything. "You're an inconvenience. You don't belong here." Maya raised her voice, surprising even herself. "Why are you treating her differently?" She scanned her ticket. Everyone saw it. Heads turned toward her. The young college student's cheeks flushed. But she didn't lower her phone. If she were white, you'd have let her sit without a word. The cabin rippled with gasps and murmurs. Some passengers looked away. Others glared at Maya as if she had broken an unspoken rule by naming what everyone already knew. Victor returned from the galley, jaw tight. He glanced sharply at Maya. "Turn that off, or you'll be removed as well." Maya's hands trembled, but she held the phone higher. "No, the world needs to see this." Selena turned slightly in her seat, meeting Maya's eyes. For a moment, gratitude flickered in her chest. This young woman was risking public confrontation to support her. Something few adults around her had dared. "Doctor," Caldwell added his voice, calm but steady. "She has every right to record. You have no authority to silence her." Victor's lips thinned. He turned his attention back to Selena, clearly unwilling to give up his crusade. "Mrs. Morgan, this is the last opportunity I will give you. Step aside until verification is complete, or you will be forcibly removed." Selena heard the collective intake of breath around her, the anticipation of drama. The passengers were waiting for her response, waiting to see whether she would crumble or stand. Inside, her heart was heavy. The humiliation had already left its mark. She thought of her daughter again, imagined explaining this scene years later. Would she be proud that her mother stood firm, or would she ask why her mother let herself be shamed so publicly? Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "I'm not moving." The silence that followed was louder than shouting. It stretched across the cabin, heavy and undeniable. Then from behind her, another voice emerged. It was soft at first, then stronger. An older woman with silver hair, her hand clutching the armrest, spoke with conviction. "She's right. She belongs here. We all saw her ticket." Her words carried weight, cracking the dam. A man across the aisle chimed in, his tone indignant. "Why are you singling her out? You didn't question any of us." "She deserves respect," another passenger muttered. "It's embarrassing, the way they're handling this." Victor stiffened, clearly rattled by the sudden chorus. His power, once absolute, was slipping. He raised his voice louder, desperate to reassert control. "Ladies and gentlemen, please understand, we are following standard procedures. This is not about race. It's about policy." The words rang hollow. Everyone had seen the double standard, the smooth passage of the Harringtons compared to the interrogation of Selena. Maya's livestream comments exploded. "This is clearly racism. We're all watching. They can't spin this. Name the airline." Tag them hashtags began forming in real time. Selena sat straighter, the fire in her chest shifting. The humiliation was still there, raw and painful, but it was no longer hers alone. It was visible, undeniable proof of a system that too often hid behind polite words and professional smiles. She spoke softly, but her words carried through the quiet. "The truth is simple. I bought my seat. I presented my ticket. I scanned it. I belong here. And the only reason this continues is because you refuse to believe what is in front of your eyes. The older woman nodded firmly. She's right. Caldwell leaned back, folding his arms, his voice deliberate. This is bigger than a seat. This is about dignity. And if you can't see that, perhaps you're in the wrong business. Victor's face flushed deep red. His eyes darted to Colin, silently demanding support. But Colin looked uncertain now. The growing voices, the cameras, the live stream, it was becoming too much to ignore. Selena's phone buzzed again. Adrian's message was short, urgent. Say the word. I'm ready. Her fingers hovered over the screen, heart pounding. She could end this now with a single revelation, but another thought rooted her. Not yet. Let them reveal themselves fully. Let the world see every layer of this injustice. So she remained silent, her eyes steady, her hands calm in her lap. Victor exhaled sharply, pulling himself upright. He turned to the officer again, his voice strained. Remove her. The officer shook his head slightly. Sir, with all due respect, I'm not putting my hands on a passenger whose boarding pass is valid. Not with cameras rolling. The murmur swelled again. Some passengers clapped quietly, subtle but deliberate. The sound was small, yet it carried a powerful message. Selena's humiliation had transformed. It was no longer the silent shame pressed upon her. It had become a mirror reflecting their actions, forcing everyone to see. Victor turned, storming back toward the galley, his authority slipping like sand through his fingers. Colin lingered, his eyes darting nervously. Before retreating as well, Selena exhaled slowly, her body trembling despite her calm exterior. She whispered inwardly, Hold steady. The tide is turning. The cabin settled into uneasy silence, but beneath it, something irreversible had begun. Witnesses had spoken. A live stream had gone viral. And for the first time, Selena was no longer standing alone. The plane was alive with tension, though no one dared to move. Passengers sat frozen in their leather seats, eyes flicking between the woman in 2A and the crew scrambling to hold authority together. The low rumble of the engines became a steady drumbeat under the silence, like a warning that something explosive was about to break. Selena Morgan remained seated, spine straight, hands folded, chin raised, outwardly calm. She was a storm inside. Every insult and dismissal over the past 20 minutes weighed on her shoulders. She could feel her grandmother's voice in her ear, reminding her, dignity is not given. It is claimed. Victor Langston returned from the galley with a new force behind him. This time, 2 uniformed airport security officers trailed him down the aisle. Their belts clinked with radios and restraints, their expressions deliberately blank. The sight of them sent a ripple of unease through the cabin. Maya Torres' live stream captured the moment instantly. Her whisper cracked with nerves as she narrated, They've brought more security. This is really happening. 30,000 people are watching now. Don't look away. Victor's voice rang through the cabin. Mrs. Morgan, you are refusing to comply with crew instructions. These officers will now escort you from this seat. The words hung in the air, cold and final. Selena's throat tightened, but she refused to let fear show. She looked up at the 2 officers, meeting their eyes directly. Gentlemen, my boarding pass was scanned. It confirmed seat 2A. I am not refusing to comply. I am complying fully with the terms of my ticket. The taller officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his partner. The second officer leaned closer to Victor, his voice low but audible. She's calm, she's seated, and she's right. If we touch her, and this goes viral, you'll have a lawsuit on your hands." Victor's jaw flexed. His pride was unraveling. He leaned toward them, whispering harshly. But Selena caught fragments. Chain of command. Disruptive. Liability. Selena closed her eyes briefly. Humiliation rose like bile. She hated being discussed like an object, a problem to be solved, while sitting silently in the middle of it all. For a flicker of a second, she wanted to disappear, to melt into the leather seat and vanish. But then she heard Maya's voice, trembling but resolute. "Stay strong. We see you." The words pierced through the fog of shame. Selena inhaled deeply, her chest rising, and opened her eyes again. She steadied her gaze on Victor. "If you order them to lay hands on me, you are not only wrong, you are criminally liable." Gas scattered through the cabin. Some passengers nodded, murmuring agreement. Others pulled out phones to record, sensing history in the making. "Doctor?" Caldwell leaned forward, his professorial voice firm. "She is absolutely correct. As a lawyer myself, I can confirm removal under these circumstances would constitute unlawful discrimination." Victor spun on him, furious. "This is none of your concern." Caldwell didn't flinch. "Justice is always my concern." The taller officer finally spoke, his voice calm but resolute. "Sir, with respect, we're not going to drag a passenger from a seat she paid for. Not while she's calm, not with this many cameras." Victor's face flushed red, his control slipping through his fingers. He turned on Selena, desperate for one last show of power. "You're humiliating yourself, Mrs. Morgan." The words cut deep, sharper than any threat. Humiliation washed over her again, threatening to break her composure. Her cheeks heated, her chest burned. She thought of her daughter's face, imagined her watching this live stream years later, asking why her mother stayed silent. Selena's inner voice roared, "You are not humiliating yourself. They are humiliating themselves." She steadied her breathing, forced her voice into calm control, and spoke clearly for all to hear. "No, Mr. Langston, you are humiliating this airline, and you are doing it in front of the entire world." The cabin erupted in murmurs. Some passengers clapped again, louder this time. Maya whispered into her phone. "She said it. She called it out. 40,000 people are watching live." Victor froze, caught in the reality of the moment. His authority, once absolute, was now fragile glass cracking under pressure. Selena's phone buzzed in her hand. Adrian's message was only 3 words. "It's time now." Her heart pounded. She had held back long enough, letting them reveal their prejudice to the fullest. The witnesses were on her side, the live stream undeniable. Now was the moment. She unlocked her phone, dialed quickly, and lifted it to her ear. The line clicked. A man's voice, smooth and commanding, answered. Adrian Morgan, speaking. The cabin fell into sudden silence. The name carried weight, though most passengers didn't yet know why. Selena's voice was calm. "Adrian, I'm on the plane. Seat 2A. They're trying to remove me." Gas rippled. Heads turned sharply. Passengers whispered his name. Some recognized it immediately. Adrian Morgan, the investor, Adrian Morgan, whose company owned significant shares in the airline itself. Adrian's voice was steady, measured like a man used to controlling boardrooms. "Put me on speaker." Selena pressed the button, her phone amplifying his voice through the cabin. "This is Adrian Morgan. I own 12% of this airline. My wife is seated in 2A. If she is not left undisturbed for the duration of this flight, This company will face consequences beyond what you can imagine. The words landed like a hammer. Victor's mouth opened, then closed again. Colin looked pale. The officers stepped back, relieved to be absolved from the mess. Passengers stared in shock, some whispering, others openly recording. Maya whispered into her live stream, "Oh my God, her husband owns part of the airline. This is over." Adrian's voice carried on, firm and unrelenting. "To the crew, this is not a suggestion. This is a directive. You will treat my wife with respect, or you will find yourselves unemployed before the wheels leave the runway." Silence. The humiliation had turned, sharp and swift, into vindication. Selena sat back, her composure still intact, though her heart hammered in her chest. The storm she had held inside finally had thunder. Victor swallowed hard, his authority shattered. "Mrs. Morgan, of course. Please make yourself comfortable." His voice cracked under the strain of false courtesy. Selena said nothing. She didn't need to. The truth was out. Adrian's voice softened slightly, directed toward her now. "Hold steady, love. I'll handle the rest." She ended the call, lowering the phone. The cabin was electric with whispers, the passengers stunned at what they had just witnessed. The humiliation lingered in Selena's chest, but it was no longer hers to carry. It belonged to Victor and Colin, to every person who had tried to push her out of her rightful seat. She folded her hands once more, her voice quiet but steady. "Now we can depart." The cabin felt like it had been struck by lightning. For a long moment, no one moved. The echo of Adrian Morgan's voice still hung in the air, vibrating through every corner of first class. He had spoken with the calm certainty of a man who controlled outcomes, not just conversations. The revelation of his name, his ownership, had shifted the entire atmosphere in an instant. Selena sat motionless in 2A, the weight of the last half hour pressing down on her shoulders. Humiliation still clung to her, raw and heavy. But now it mixed with something else, vindication. She had not needed to scream or fight or beg. She had simply endured, and the truth had arrived at the right time. Passengers whispered furiously among themselves. Some leaned into their phones, reporting to friends and family what they had just seen. Others scrolled through social media, already finding clips from Maya Torres's live stream spreading across platforms. The number of viewers had doubled again in minutes. Maya's voice trembled with awe as she whispered into her phone, "You guys heard it. That was Adrian Morgan. His wife is right here. This whole thing is going global." Colin Mercer stood frozen near the galley, his professional mask shattered. His eyes darted nervously, his posture shrinking as though trying to disappear. Only an hour earlier, he had spoken to Selena with quiet contempt, treating her like an intruder in a world meant for others. Now he looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if the ground beneath him would collapse. Victor Langston was pale. His authority, so carefully wielded moments ago, had been torn away with one speakerphone call. He wiped at his forehead, beads of sweat glistening, and when he spoke, his voice lacked its earlier bite. "Mrs. Morgan, we sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. Please let us make you comfortable." Selena's eyes lifted, calm and piercing, a misunderstanding. The question was soft but heavy. Passengers caught the subtle sting in her tone. Victor swallowed. "Yes, of course. A regrettable error. Nothing more. Dr." Caldwell let out a low chuckle, the sound of disbelief. "I've been a lawyer for 40 years. Mr. Langston, I know the difference between an error and discrimination." So does everyone else here. Victor flinched as murmurs rippled through the cabin. Selena leaned back in her seat, the leather creaking softly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You didn't question anyone else. Only me. And you didn't stop until you thought you could remove me entirely. That isn't a mistake. That's a choice. The silence afterward was brutal. Victor opened his mouth to protest, then shut it again. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't expose him further. The older woman who had spoken earlier folded her hands over her purse and nodded firmly. She's right. We all saw it. Several passengers murmured agreement. The cabin was no longer neutral ground. It was a courtroom, and the verdict was forming in real time. Selena closed her eyes, exhaustion seeping into her bones. She wanted to disappear into the hum of the engines, to let the world fade for a moment. But she knew the storm was only just beginning, because this was not just about her seat. It was about what would happen next at airline headquarters, across social media, in the news. Adrian's intervention had guaranteed that this incident would not stay contained to one plane. It would ripple outward, breaking barriers and reputations alike. In the cockpit, Captain Reed's voice crackled through the intercom, measured but uneasy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are experiencing a slight delay, but will be departing shortly. Please remain seated. The announcement was hollow. Everyone knew what the delay was about. Everyone knew this was no ordinary boarding issue. Selena's phone buzzed again. A message from Adrian HQ is already in emergency mode. They're calling me. Let them sweat. She smiled faintly, relief mixing with weariness. Her husband had always known how to wield power. But what mattered to her was not the leverage, not the money, not the influence. What mattered was that he believed in her dignity, and he would burn down systems to protect it. Victor retreated to the galley, whispering harshly to Colin. Passengers could still hear fragments career, viral, consequences. Their fear was palpable, a sharp contrast to their arrogance only half an hour earlier. Maya whispered into her phone again. This is insane. They tried to push her out, and now her husband might shut down the airline. 50,000 people are watching. The comments are blowing up. Selena finally spoke again, her voice quiet, but reaching every corner of the cabin. You may humiliate me, but you cannot silence me. Not anymore. The words landed with weight. A man in the second row clapped softly, then stopped, embarrassed. But the gesture mattered. It was a signal that the tide had turned. Selena leaned back, letting her eyes close briefly. She imagined Adrian in his office, phone pressed to his ear, executives scrambling on the other end. She imagined their faces when he reminded them of his 12% ownership, of the contracts he could freeze, of the deals he could cancel. She knew his style measured, calm, but devastating. Her humiliation was not erased, but it was being transformed into something else, into evidence, into a story that could no longer be buried. The cabin was restless now. Some passengers typed furiously on laptops, already drafting posts or emails. Others leaned across aisles, discussing the moment in hushed tones. The atmosphere had shifted from discomfort to reckoning. Selena opened her eyes, scanning the room. She saw fear on Colin's face, desperation on Victor's, determination on Caldwell's, awe on Maya's. She realized that she was not just enduring this moment. She was defining it. Her inner voice whispered, "This is bigger than you. This is bigger than Adrian. This is about every person who has ever been told to move, to wait, to prove themselves twice." She straightened in her seat. the weight of history pressing on her, but also lifting her higher. Adrian's name had detonated the silence. Now the fallout would decide what kind of justice followed. Selena folded her hands once more, her expression serene but unyielding. She whispered inwardly, almost like a prayer, "Let the world see," and the world was already watching. At 30,000 feet, an airplane is supposed to feel like a sanctuary of order, a capsule sealed off from the chaos of the world below. But inside the first-class cabin that evening, order had collapsed. Authority had shifted from the uniformed crew to a single passenger sitting quietly in seat 2A. Selena Morgan's posture had not changed. She still sat upright, calm, her hands folded in her lap, but her stillness carried a gravity that reshaped the cabin. The crew had retreated. Passengers murmured in hushed awe, and Maya's live stream continued to swell, tens of thousands turning into hundreds of thousands. The hum of the engines was steady, but every other sound in the plane felt sharper, heavier. The rustle of newspapers, the click of seat belts, the faint cough of a child in the back. All of it seemed amplified against the tension that lingered around Selena. Her phone buzzed again. Adrian's name appeared, followed by a short text. "They've convened an emergency call. CEO, legal, comms, ops. I am on the line. Just hold steady." Selena exhaled slowly. She imagined the scene in a glass-walled boardroom hundreds of miles away. Executives in suits, faces pale, scrambling to contain a crisis they hadn't expected. Adrian's voice cutting through their panic, cool and uncompromising. She could see it so clearly she almost felt she was there. Victor Langston stood at the galley entrance, whispering furiously into his radio. His earlier arrogance had dissolved into something rawer fear. The words drifted across the cabin in fragments. Headquarters. Viral. Suspension. Colin Mercer leaned against the galley wall, his arms crossed, his face drained of color. The smirk he had once worn was gone, replaced by the look of a man realizing his career might have just ended at 35,000 feet. "Doctor!" Caldwell spoke softly from across the aisle. His voice meant only for Selena. "You've handled this with extraordinary grace. I hope you know that." Selena turned slightly, her expression weary but grateful. "Grace is sometimes the only weapon left." Caldwell nodded slowly. "And sometimes it's the most powerful one." Maya shifted in her seat, her phone still raised. "Mrs. Morgan, there are over 200,000 people watching right now. They're flooding the airline's page with comments. They're demanding answers." Selena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of those words. She had never wanted to be a symbol, never wanted her private dignity to become a public stage. Yet here she was, both woman and witness, both victim and vessel for something larger. Her inner thoughts churned. What if this changes nothing? What if all of this humiliation becomes nothing more than another viral clip that people forget in a week? She imagined her daughter again, older now, scrolling through the archives of the internet, finding her mother's face in shaky footage. Would she see strength, or would she only see pain? Her phone buzzed once more, this time with a message from Adrian that made her heart beat faster. "They're panicking. CEO is demanding details. Legal says they're exposed. I reminded them who holds their contracts. This is not ending quietly." She could almost hear his voice in her head, calm but lethal. Adrian was not a man who shouted. He didn't need to. He used silence like a blade, waiting for others to fill it with fear. Victor finally returned, his face tight, his voice stripped of its earlier thunder. "Mrs. Morgan, The airline deeply regrets the events that have occurred. We want to assure you that you will be treated with the utmost respect for the remainder of this flight." The words tasted rehearsed, hollow. Selena tilted her head, studying him. Respect is not something you offer when it is convenient. Respect is owed, always. Her words landed softly but decisively, like stones dropped into water. The ripples were unmistakable. The older woman in the front row nodded in agreement, her silver hair gleaming under the cabin light. "That's exactly right." Several other passengers murmured in support. One even clapped softly, the sound awkward but sincere. The atmosphere shifted again, passengers recognizing that the power dynamic had changed permanently. Meanwhile, the livestream numbers ticked upward. Maya's voice cracked with disbelief as she updated her audience. 300,000 watching. "This is unreal. The airline stock is tanking in real time." Selena's chest tightened. She hadn't expected it to escalate so quickly. The humiliation she had endured was still raw, but now it was fusing with something else impact. Her suffering was being translated into a public reckoning, a mirror held up to an industry that had too long ignored its reflection. Her thoughts wrestled in silence. Is this justice, or is this spectacle? Will it change them, or only entertain the crowd? She pressed her hands together, grounding herself. Justice, she decided, was not always clean. Sometimes it came wrapped in spectacle. Sometimes it required the world to stare at what it preferred to ignore. The intercom chimed again. Captain Reed's voice returned, steady but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for your patience. We are cleared for departure. Please fasten your seat belts." The cabin buzzed with motion as passengers adjusted, but their eyes never strayed far from seat 2A. Selena's presence had become the quiet center of gravity, the axis around which the entire flight revolved. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Selena leaned her head against the seat. For the first time in an hour, she allowed herself a private sigh. She felt drained, but she also felt a strange clarity. The humiliation she had endured was no longer hers alone. It had been witnessed, recorded, and magnified. Adrian's last message glowed on her phone. "This is only the beginning." Selena closed her eyes, whispering inwardly, "Then let it begin." The plane lurched gently as it began its taxi. Outside the windows, the runway lights stretched like glowing rivers, guiding the jet into motion. Inside, the cabin remained thick with tension, even as safety announcements droned overhead. People buckled their seatbelts, but their eyes still flickered toward 2A. Selena Morgan pressed her head lightly against the cool leather, watching the reflection of lights race past her window. For a fleeting moment, she wished she could simply be another passenger, anonymous, unnoticed, free to disappear into the soft hum of engines. Instead, she had become the axis of a storm that was no longer confined to this plane. Maya Torres whispered into her phone, "We're moving now, guys. But don't think this is over. 400,000 are watching." The glow of her live stream lit her young face like a lantern. Her audience had grown into a small city. Selena closed her eyes. Her chest was tight, her body exhausted from the silent war of dignity she had fought for nearly an hour. She thought of her daughter again, the child's small hand once gripping hers as they boarded flights together. She had promised herself to shield her from the ugliness of the world. Yet here she was, living that ugliness in front of strangers, with cameras capturing every angle. Her inner voice whispered a question she dreaded. What if my daughter sees this one day? Will she see a mother who endured? Or will she see a woman humiliated? The engines roared louder. pushing her deeper into her seat as the plane accelerated. Passengers clutched armrests. The jet lifted smoothly, the weight of gravity replaced by the ascent into dark sky. The world below fell away, city lights shrinking to a scatter of stars. The ascent should have been a moment of peace. Instead, Selena felt trapped between worlds, the world outside, where her husband was battling executives, and the world inside this cabin, where her humiliation had played out like a trial before strangers. Victor Langston emerged from the galley once more, his posture smaller now, his face drawn tight. He approached with forced courtesy. "Mrs. Morgan, may I offer you a glass of wine?" On behalf of the airline. Selena turned her gaze on him, calm but piercing. "What I want cannot be poured into a glass." The words silenced him. He lingered for a moment, then retreated awkwardly, his hollow apology trailing in his shadow. Colin Mercer hovered nearby, shifting uneasily as he adjusted meal trays no one had asked for. He avoided her eyes. His arrogance collapsed into nervous silence. The audience had seen too much for him to pretend any more. "Dr." Caldwell leaned slightly toward her. "That was well said." Selena gave him a faint smile. "Sometimes words are the only weapons we have." He nodded. "And you use them with precision." The cabin settled into a fragile quiet, but beneath it, the undercurrent of scrutiny remained. Passengers typed feverishly on their phones. Screens glowed with live comments, trending hashtags, breaking news alerts. The story had escaped the confines of this plane. Selena's phone buzzed again. A message from Adrian. "They've called in crisis PR. Legal wants to negotiate. I told them this is no negotiation. This is accountability." She exhaled, her heart aching with both pride and weariness. Adrian was relentless, but she wondered, not for the first time, how much of their lives would always be spent fighting battles they had never asked for. Her inner thoughts shifted again, darker this time. Why must we always carry this weight? Why must dignity be defended instead of assumed? She blinked hard, forcing back the sting in her eyes. She would not let the cabin see her break. She had carried humiliation and turned it into a mirror for others. She could carry this too. The older woman in the front row turned slightly, her voice gentle. "You're stronger than you know, dear." Selena met her gaze. The woman's eyes were kind, steady, filled with the wisdom of decades. "Strength," Selena said softly, "isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's the only option left." The woman nodded knowingly. Maya's phone buzzed loudly, her gasp audible. "Oh my God," she whispered, eyes wide. 500,000. We've hit 500,000 viewers. A low murmur rippled across the cabin. People glanced at their own screens, confirming the viral explosion. The plane had become a stage, and Selena its unwilling centerpiece. Selena straightened slightly, inhaling deeply. Her humiliation had been real, raw, and consuming, but now it had become something larger, something that belonged to everyone watching. Her suffering had transformed into evidence, into fuel for outrage, into a demand for change. Still, she felt the private cost. Every camera capturing her face was also capturing her vulnerability. Every viewer was a stranger watching her dignity tested in real time. She whispered inwardly, "Let this not be in vain." The plane leveled off, the seatbelt sign chiming softly. Passengers shifted, some retrieving laptops, others pulling blankets. Yet the atmosphere remained taut, as if all knew they were participants in a moment that stretched beyond this flight. Selena's phone buzzed again. Another message from Adrian. Stay steady. This is spreading across networks. Anchors are picking it up. They're calling me next." She smiled faintly. Adrian thrived in battlefields like these, where power was currency and words were weapons. She, however, carried the human cost, the silent bruises invisible to cameras. Her gaze wandered to the window. Beyond the glass, the night stretched endless, dotted with stars. She whispered to herself, "I will not let them define me. I will define this moment." "Doctor—" Caldwell caught her words and gave a slight nod. "Maya, still streaming," whispered to her phone. "She's the calmest person I've ever seen. She's sitting in the middle of chaos, and she's unshaken." But Selena knew the truth. She was shaken, deeply. Her hands trembled when hidden under the tray table. Her stomach churned with the weight of exposure. Yet strength was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to move forward anyway. She closed her eyes again, centering herself. "This is not just about me. This is about every person told they don't belong. Every person forced to prove their worth twice." The cabin lights dimmed slightly, signaling the shift into cruise. A hush fell again, passengers finally leaning back. But Selena remained alert, her body taut with both fatigue and purpose. Her phone buzzed one last time that hour. Adrian's words were simple. "By the time you land, this airline will never be the same." Selena exhaled, her voice barely audible as she whispered, "Then let the change begin." The plane had settled into its cruising altitude, but the air in the cabin felt heavier than the thin atmosphere outside. Passengers leaned back in their seats, yet no one truly relaxed. Screens glowed with news alerts. Fingers tapped rapidly across keyboards. Whispers carried from row to row. It was as though the entire flight existed in two worlds at once, the quiet hum of an aircraft in motion, and the roaring storm of public scrutiny exploding online. Selena Morgan sat in seat Toe, her body outwardly still, her mind a battlefield. Every word spoken to her by Victor and Collins still rang in her ears, like bruises that could not be seen, but pulsed with pain. She pressed her fingertips gently against her knees to stop their trembling. Her phone buzzed again. Adrian's message read, "They are scrambling. CEO wants to draft a statement tonight. Legal is talking liability. PR is in meltdown." She exhaled slowly, her lips parting in a whisper only she could hear. "So much noise, and yet the silence inside me is louder." She had been here before, not on a plane, but in life, in rooms where her competence was questioned, where her presence was challenged, where she was asked to prove her worth again and again. But this time was different. This time it was public, magnified by 500,000 strangers watching in real time. Maya Torres' voice broke through her thoughts, soft but urgent. "Mrs. Morgan, it's everywhere. CNN just picked it up. Twitter's on fire. Hashtags with your name. People are calling this a turning point." Selena turned her head slightly, meeting Maya's wide eyes. The young woman looked exhilarated and terrified all at once, holding her phone like a torch in the dark. Selena's voice was steady. Turning points are only real if they turn into action. Maya nodded quickly, whispering into her phone to the viewers. "She's calm. She's strong. Even now. You all heard that. Doctor—" Caldwell leaned forward, his voice low, reassuring. "She's right. But don't underestimate what you've already done. Mrs. Morgan, you forced the world to confront what it prefers to deny." Selena looked at him, her eyes shadowed with weariness. "And yet, I'm so tired of being the lesson." Her words lingered, pulling the air from the room. The older woman in the front row turned, her silver hair catching the light. "Dear, sometimes history chooses its teachers, not because it is fair, but because it must be done." Selena swallowed, her throat tight. She thought again of her daughter, the child's small face etched with innocence. Was this the legacy she wanted, for her to inherit a world where dignity had to be fought for, seat by seat? Or was she showing her how to stand when the world tried to push her down? Her inner thoughts grew sharper. What if this moment defines me forever? What if I am remembered not for my work, not for my love, but for this humiliation? But then another voice, quieter, rose in her heart. Or perhaps you will be remembered for your strength, for refusing to surrender when it mattered most. The plane shuddered slightly in turbulence, a reminder that they were still cutting through the dark sky. A nervous laugh rippled from a passenger in the back. The hum of engines remained steady, grounding them in motion. Victor reappeared, his face pale, his hands clasped as if in prayer. He bent slightly, lowering his voice. "Mrs. Morgan, please understand. We were following procedures." Selena tilted her head, her eyes steady. "Whose procedures instruct you to doubt one passenger above all others? Whose policies tell you to ignore a boarding pass when it belongs to someone like me?" Victor's lips parted, but no answer came. He glanced around, aware that every passenger was listening, every phone recording. He muttered, "We will review everything, I assure you." Selena's voice was soft, but each word cut through him. "Review will not undo humiliation. Policy will not erase pain. Respect is the only cure, and respect cannot be written into a manual. It must be lived." Gaffs and nods moved through the cabin. Maya whispered into her phone, "That's the line. Respect must be lived." "Oh my God." Victor retreated again, shrinking into the galley shadows. Colin avoided eye contact altogether, his hands shaking slightly as he poured drinks no one had requested. Selena leaned back, exhaustion settling into her bones. She whispered inwardly, "How many more times must I prove my worth? How many more humiliations must turn into battles?" Her phone buzzed once more. Adrian's words were short but powerful. "Hold steady. I have escalated. This will not end with apologies." Selena felt a swell of gratitude, mingled with sorrow. Adrian carried the fight from the ground, using leverage and contracts and shareholder power, but she carried the bruises. She was the one who had sat through the stares, the whispers, the commands to move. Her inner thoughts trembled. I am both weapon and wound, both example and victim. "Doctor," Caldwell's voice steadied her again, "do not let their ignorance define you. Tonight, you are writing something larger than yourself." She met his gaze, her voice almost a whisper, "Then let it be written with dignity." The cabin lights dimmed further, casting the passengers in softer hues. Outside the windows, the sky stretched endless, dotted with distant stars. Yet inside, all eyes remained tethered to one woman in 2A. Selena closed her eyes, drawing strength from the quiet. The storm was not over, but she felt its power shifting. Humiliation was no longer shackling her. It was fueling something greater. As she drifted between thought and silence, Adrian's final message of the hour appeared on her screen. "Prepare yourself. By the time you land, the world will know your name." Her chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with resolve. She whispered to herself, "Steady and clear, then let them know me for who I am." The engines roared softly in the background, carrying them through the night. And in that sealed cabin, the weight of truth pressed down like gravity, unyielding and undeniable. The aircraft sliced through the night at 35,000 feet, its silver body glowing faintly under the moon. Inside the first-class cabin, a quiet unease still pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the surface. Every passenger knew they were living inside a story that was no longer confined to these narrow aisles. Selena Morgan sat upright in 2A, her hands resting neatly in her lap. Her outward calm belied the storm inside. She replayed every insult, every sideways glance, every order to move that had built to this moment. Her humiliation clung to her like smoke, yet it was no longer suffocating. It was transforming into fire. Her phone vibrated on the tray table. A message from Adrian appeared. The board has been called into an emergency session. I have insisted that this is not about damage control. This is about survival. They are listening. Selena closed her eyes briefly, her breath steadying. She could almost see Adrian in his office, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, voice low and lethal. She knew his style. He did not need to raise his voice to command a room. Silence was his weapon. And tonight, it was cutting deep into those who had underestimated him. Across the aisle, Maya Torres whispered into her phone. We've passed 600,000 viewers. It's everywhere now. News anchors, celebrities, people I've never seen are sharing it. Hashtags are trending in 10 different countries. Selena turned her head slightly. Maya's young face glowed in the dim light, her eyes wide with awe and fear. Selena's voice was calm, almost maternal. Remember this, Maya. Remember that truth can fly further than any plane. Maya swallowed, nodding quickly, whispering to her audience. She's unbelievable. She's teaching even now. Doctor? Caldwell leaned forward, his brow furrowed in thought. Mrs. Morgan, forgive me for saying this, but you are carrying something tonight that will echo far beyond this flight. Selena gave him a faint smile tinged with exhaustion. And yet, I would give anything for silence, to be just another woman on a plane. The older woman in the front row turned slightly, her voice soft but resolute. Sometimes silence is a luxury we cannot afford. Sometimes the world must hear. Selena absorbed her words, her chest tightening. She thought of her daughter again, that innocent smile, the way her little hands once pressed against airplane windows in wonder. Was this the legacy she wanted to leave? Not one of wealth or position, but one of dignity held firm under pressure. Her inner thoughts turned darker. But what if my daughter only sees pain when she looks at me? What if the world remembers humiliation louder than resilience? Her phone buzzed again, breaking the spiral. Another message from Adrian. They are drafting a preliminary settlement offer. I told them no. This cannot be solved with money. They must face the truth publicly. Anything less, and I will burn contracts worth billions. Selena's lips curved in the faintest smile. Adrian was relentless. Yet she knew his strength came from the same place as hers, from a refusal to let dignity be bartered like currency. Victor Langston appeared again, his voice trembling now, stripped of the arrogance he had wielded earlier. Mrs. Morgan, please, allow us to serve you. A warm meal, anything you need. Selena lifted her gaze, calm and unwavering. I do not need your meal, Mr. Langston. I need your honesty. Her words fell heavy in the air. Passengers glanced at one another, recognizing the depth of the wound. Victor shifted uncomfortably, mumbling, I was only following procedure. Selena's voice was soft but decisive. Procedure never told you to doubt the truth in my hands. Procedure never told you to strip me of my seat. That was your choice. Gasps and nods traveled through the cabin. Maya whispered into her phone. That's it. She's holding him accountable in front of everyone. Victor retreated once more. His shoulders slumped. Colin Mercer avoided eye contact. His hands busy with cups he had no intention of serving. Both men seemed like ghosts of their earlier selves, shadows of arrogance now consumed by fear. Selena leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. She whispered inwardly, I will not let them define this night. I will define it myself. The plane rattled briefly in turbulence, the overhead bins creaking. Passengers tightened their seat belts. The cabin lights dimmed further, bathing everyone in muted blue. Yet all eyes remained on 2A, where a woman had become the center of gravity. Maya's phone pinged with a loud notification. She gasped. We just crossed 700,000. Mrs. Morgan, you're on every platform, every headline. This flight is history now. Selena opened her eyes, her voice calm. History is not written in headlines. It is written in what comes after. Her words carried through the cabin, quiet but undeniable. Dr. Caldwell nodded firmly, his voice carrying weight. And what comes after, Mrs. Morgan, may finally be justice. Her phone buzzed again, Adrian's name glowing. The message was sharp. They are fractured. CEO wants to apologize privately. I demanded a public reckoning. Either they face the truth, or I pull every contract and leave them bleeding in the market. Selena exhaled slowly. She whispered inwardly, then let them bleed if they must. Her chest ached with both sorrow and resolve. This was not the life she had wanted, not the battle she had chosen. But perhaps it was the one she had been called to fight. The engines hummed steadily, carrying them further into the night. Yet in that sealed cabin, Selena's quiet strength had become thunder, and the world, watching through countless screens, was listening. The plane descended slowly, its wings tilting as it cut through thick clouds. The cabin lights brightened, signaling the final stretch, but the atmosphere inside was anything but routine. Everyone knew that when the wheels touched down, the storm outside would be waiting. Selena Morgan sat in 2A, her seatbelt buckled, her gaze fixed on the shrinking skyline below. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her spirit remained steady. She had endured humiliation, carried the sting of doubt, and yet she had not surrendered. She had endured long enough for truth to rise. Her phone buzzed on the tray table. Adrian's final message before landing glowed across the screen. Media is at the gate. CEO has agreed to a public address. You will not walk off that plane unseen. Hold steady. I'll be there. Selena exhaled, pressing her hands together. She whispered inwardly, I never wanted a stage, but if it has been given to me, then I will speak. Around her, passengers whispered with anticipation. Some craned their necks to glimpse the runway lights. Others scrolled furiously on their phones, watching as headlines multiplied. Maya's livestream had crossed 800,000 viewers and was still climbing. The world was waiting to see what would happen next. Victor Langston stood stiffly at the galley, his face drawn, sweat beading along his hairline. Colin Mercer busied himself with collecting empty cups. Though his trembling hands betrayed his panic, both men looked like defendants awaiting judgment. Dr. Caldwell leaned closer to Selena, his voice low. When you step off this plane, you will not be stepping off alone. All of us here are witnesses, and the world will not forget. Selena nodded faintly. Then let them remember dignity, not humiliation. The older woman in the front row smiled gently. Child, They will remember strength. You held it when others would have broken. The engines roared as the wheels extended. The cabin jolted slightly, passengers clutching armrests as the plane descended through turbulence. The city lights grew larger, sharper, until finally the ground rushed up beneath them. With a heavy thud, the plane touched down. Brakes screeched, engines whined, and the cabin shuddered as the aircraft slowed on the runway. Applause erupted in the back rows, a release of tension. But the clapping soon faded as eyes turned once more to 2A. Everyone knew the real landing was still ahead. The plane taxied toward the gate. Through her window, Selena saw flashing lights, police vehicles, black sedans, media vans crowded along the terminal. Cameras waited like watchful eyes, lenses gleaming under the fluorescent glow. The intercom chimed. Captain Reed's voice was strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. For operational reasons, we ask all passengers to remain seated until further instructions are given." Murmurs filled the cabin. Passengers exchanged glances, realizing the unusual protocol. They were being held in place, not for safety, but for spectacle. Selena's phone buzzed again. Adrian's message was short. "I'm here." Her heart tightened. She straightened in her seat, inhaling deeply. The humiliation still stung, but it no longer defined her. She was ready to turn pain into testimony. The aircraft door finally opened with a hiss. A stream of cool air rushed in, mingled with the sound of voices outside. Uniformed officials stepped in, followed by airline executives with pale faces. Behind them, cameras flashed, spilling harsh light into the cabin. Adrian appeared at the doorway, tall and composed, his presence commanding. His eyes locked on Selena immediately, and for a moment, the chaos around them dissolved. He walked down the aisle with unhurried steps, his calm presence drawing every gaze. When he reached her seat, he extended his hand. Selena took it, rising slowly. Their eyes met, and in that quiet exchange, strength passed between them. Adrian turned, addressing the cabin. His voice was deep, steady, impossible to ignore. Every person here is a witness to what happened, and every camera outside is about to hear the truth. This is no longer about one seat. This is about dignity. Applause broke out, scattered but growing. Passengers nodded, some raising their phones higher to capture the moment. Victor tried to step forward, his voice desperate. "Mr. Morgan, please." Adrian's gaze silenced him instantly. "You will not speak. You will listen. The time for excuses is over." Colin lowered his eyes, shrinking back into the galley. Adrian looked at Selena, his voice softening. "Shall we? Together." They walked down the aisle, every step heavy with meaning. The passengers leaned aside, parting as though witnessing a procession. Cameras flashed wildly as they neared the exit. When Selena stepped through the doorway onto the jet bridge, the world erupted. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward, flashes exploding in her face. Adrian lifted his hand, quieting them with a gesture. Selena paused, her heart pounding. She had not wanted this stage, but it had found her, and she would not waste it. She raised her chin, her voice carrying above the noise. "I was told tonight that my presence did not belong in the seat I paid for. I was humiliated, doubted, dismissed, but I chose not to move. I chose to endure, because dignity is not given, it is claimed." The crowd hushed, cameras capturing every syllable. This is not only my story. This is the story of countless others who have been told they do not belong. Tonight it was me. Tomorrow it may be someone else. It must end. Applause burst from behind her. Passengers who had followed stood on the jet bridge, clapping, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. Maya held her phone high, her live stream audience now surpassing 1 million. Selena's voice did not waver. Respect must not be written only in policies. It must be lived, every day, by every person in uniform. Tonight, I demand not only an apology, I demand change. For myself, for my daughter, for everyone who has ever been told they are less. The terminal erupted in cheers, some shouting her name. Adrian placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his eyes proud. The airline executives stood silently nearby, their faces pale under the weight of public shame. They knew the cameras were capturing not just her words, but their silence. Selena took Adrian's hand once more, her chest rising with resolve. She whispered inwardly, "Let the world see." And the world was already watching. As the plane touched down and the doors opened, Selena Morgan walked into a storm of cameras and questions, but she did not walk alone. Behind her stood passengers who had witnessed the humiliation. Around her echoed the voices of hundreds of thousands who had watched in disbelief. And beside her was Adrian Morgan, her husband, who demanded that the airline face the truth, not with hollow words, but with action. In that moment, dignity became louder than prejudice. Calm defiance became stronger than arrogance. Selena did not choose to be a symbol, but when the world tried to strip her of belonging, she chose to stand. And isn't that the lesson for all of us, that respect cannot be conditional, that justice cannot wait until it is convenient, that every person deserves to be seen, not questioned, when they take their seat? Her story is more than a viral clip. It is a mirror, forcing us to ask how many others have been silenced, how many have walked away without the world watching, and will we allow it to continue? Let Selena's strength remind us that change begins not in boardrooms, but in the choices we make to honor one another's humanity. If this story moved you, help us keep these voices alive. Like, share, and subscribe, so you never miss the next story that challenges, inspires, and demands more from all of us, because dignity should never need defending.